In the history of the United States, there has been one congressman to win re-election from jail. In 1798, Vermont Congressman Matthew Lyon was imprisoned under the Alien and Sedition laws, which had authorized the president to bar immigrants, expel immigrants, and incarcerate the press. Matthew Lyon was thrown in jail because of what he had been writing and speaking during his re-election campaign, mainly that he said the president had selfish avarice, required foolish adulation, and ridiculous pomp. But throwing the man in jail was not how things started. The animosity started between him and the president, who was Adams at the time, because Matthew Lyon's first speech on the floor of Congress was to refuse to genuflect in front of incoming President John Adams. You heard me correctly. That is a historic fact. John Adams expected people to kneel before speaking to the president, and then he would say, "Rise and address His Excellency." So Matthew Lyon, who was a representative of Vermont, who had fought in the Revolutionary War so that there would be no more kings, refused to genuflect. And the Federalist Congress, they had the Senate, they had the Congress, they had the White House, they were incensed that he would not comply. Lots of debates and accusations on the floor of the Congress. Eventually, they excused Matthew from attending the inauguration, and the rest of the Congress genuflected for Adams as he became president. It was the last time Congress went on bended knee. It was Lyon's first speech. So the Federalists decided that they needed to put this man in his place. So they dug around for some dirty laundry, which they found, because early in Matthew Lyon's military career, while he was still a Green Mountain boy up in Vermont, he had been accused of dereliction of duty when he ordered a retreat against orders of Flatlander General Gates. He ordered a retreat. The Green Mountain Boys had been assigned to guard a wheat prospector's wheat field in Jericho, Vermont, and against overwhelming odds of a Native American tribe working for the British, he ordered a retreat. So he was cashiered and awarded a wooden sword of cowardice. Now, his honor was later restored, and in fact, he was a colonel and paymaster to General Seth Warner. He was at Saratoga, he was at Ticonderoga, he was at Montgomery's March. But this early engagement, he was awarded a wooden sword of cowardice. So back to the floor of Congress. The guy won't shut up. He's not playing along. So they dig for some dirty laundry, and the Federalists find out about this wooden sword. One day, Matthew Lyon's on the floor of Congress, and they're not in session, but he is speaking loud enough to be overheard. And he says, if you sent me to Connecticut with a printing press, in 6 months they wouldn't vote for Federalists anymore. Well, the Federalist representative of Connecticut, Roger Griswold, took offense at this and said, hey, when you come to Connecticut, are you going to bring your wooden sword? Matthew Lyon pretended not to hear him. Griswold, remember, this is an honor-based society. Griswold went and bodily turned Matthew Lyon around and said to his face, when you come to Connecticut, are you going to bring your wooden sword? And Matthew spat in his face. There was a giant uproar on the floor of Congress, as you might imagine. Griswold tried to have Lyon kicked out of Congress, but they weren't in session. And even the Federalist congressmen and majority, well, they couldn't deny that Griswold had started it, and that the next step would be a duel. If your honor is so insulted, challenge the man to a duel. Griswold was not about to challenge Lyon, a Revolutionary War soldier, to a duel. So a number of weeks later, he snuck up behind him and attacked him, beat him over the head with a hickory cane. Lyon defended himself, got to the fireplace, got the fire poker, disarmed Griswold, and the Speaker of the House called for order. So they've realized that they're not going to shut this man up. So they decide to make what he's saying illegal. And he had been running for re-election, and in this speech he was talking about how misplaced the power of the executive branch is, in this undying thirst for power, and the appointment of favorites and the dismissal of people who have any independent thought, and men of meanness preferred for the ease with which they take up and advocate opinions. His speeches are amazing. So in this stump speech that he also sent to different newspapers to get published, that's when he said the president had selfish avarice, required foolish adulation, and ridiculous pomp. One of the newspapers that received the letter was owned by the Federalists. And they had gotten wind from their contacts in the Federalist government that, everything he said in this speech in about a week is going to be illegal. So hang on to that letter. Don't publish it, regardless of the postmark of when you received it. Don't publish that letter until about a week goes by, and then this will be illegal for him to be saying. So the Federalist newspaper waits. They publish the article. The sheriff arrives at Matthew Lyon's house in Fairhaven, Vermont, and they march a sitting congressman in shackles 40 miles from Fairhaven to Vergennes. That 40-mile stretch, the Lyons March, is arguably more important to American history than Paul Revere's Freedom Ride in Boston. And it wasn't Paul Revere who did the riding, it was William Dawes, but I digress. They marched a sitting congressman 40 miles to throw him in jail in Vergennes, Vermont. It was October. The trial was a joke. Men in the jury were of known enmity to Matthew. The judge said he wished he could have put in a harsher sentence, but they threw him in jail for 4 months, the 4 coldest months of the year, October through February. They refused to give him a stove. They didn't even want to put shutters on the windows. Matthew's in jail. Oh, one nice little detail, the alien sedition law, the law they used to throw him in jail, that was signed on Matthew Lyon's birthday, and he was the first man charged under it because it was so personal between him and Adams. So the man's in jail, and he's writing from jail, and everything he's writing from jail is going viral. In fact, Benjamin Franklin is publishing Matthew Lyon's articles in his newspaper in Boston called the Aurora. Well, John Adams shuts down the Aurora because you can't speak out against the president. It's illegal. He's in jail, and the day comes to pay his bail. And Senator Mason rides up from Virginia with a collection of gold from Jefferson, Madison, Monroe to pay Matthew Lyon's bail. There are witnesses saying that more people were in the town of Vergennes on the day that Matthew Lyon made bail than were at the Constitutional Convention. The Green Mountain Boys were there with whom he served. The sons of the Green Mountain Boys were there, all of them making it very clear the Lion of Vermont gets out of jail today. They all wanted to contribute to his bail, so they agreed no one would put more than a quarter on this old stump in front of the jail cell. But Lyon refused their money. You see, I've had your vote. I've won re-election from jail by a 2-to-1 margin. Having received your vote, how could I take your money? Now, at the time, the country was formed on competing business interests. Arguably, independence itself was about not being the middleman to commerce anymore. But these business interests had lots of local connections. So, for example, if you were trying to get to the seat of power in Philadelphia and you were coming from South Carolina and you had to go through North Carolina because North Carolina and South Carolina are both trying to vote on a government contract, well, the guy from South Carolina might not make it to the vote and North Carolina might win that vote because you might just get arrested coming through competing interests territory. So for this reason, federal officials were not under local jurisdiction while they were on their way to work, on their way home from work, or while they were under federal employee. That's different now. Local laws still apply across the blanket, but in the early country, federal employees were only under the jurisdiction of the federal government. This applied to Matthew as well. The day before he was going to get out, the jailer, Jabez Fitch, came and spoke to him with a whole bundle of new warrants. Everything you've written from jail is another charge of sedition. Make yourself comfortable. You're not going anywhere. Well, the day comes. The door opens. Matthew Lyon steps out. His first foot hits the ground and he says, "I'm off to Philadelphia," which means I'm a federal employee. I'm not under your jurisdiction. See you later. A parade 12 miles long with the Vermont flag in its lead sets forth from Vergennes, Vermont to the seat of power in Philadelphia. We know it was a 12-mile long parade because it was a cavalcade of horse-drawn sleighs on the frozen Otter Creek. It was February when he got out, and then the creek was frozen. And the space between Middlebury and Vergennes was full of this parade, and that's a 12-mile length. They stopped in every town, they drank, they did speeches, they fired cannon salutes. Matthew Lyon made it back to the seat of power in Philadelphia in time to cast the deciding ballot in the failed election of 1800 that gave us Thomas Jefferson. I am leaving out so many details. Arguably, I'm leaving out the most important character and the most important facets of Matthew Lyon's character, because this story doesn't just talk to us about the formation of democracy. It also talks to us about some of the more unpleasant hypocrisies that have led us in this cyclical nature of our country. One super cool fact about Matthew Lyon. He founded Fairhaven, Vermont. In Fairhaven, Vermont, he published a newspaper called The Scourge of Aristocracy. It was printed on a printing press purchased from Benjamin Franklin, and the typeset letters, the actual letters that made the words of The Scourge of Aristocracy, the typeset letters were made from melted down bullets of the Revolutionary War. You will find no better example of the value of free press. And like I said, I've missed probably the most important stuff in this brief video synopsis. Thank you for your time.